How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Tuesday, August 20th. Another schedule of full NFL storylines to get to on today's show. Pretty heavily based on quarterbacks as well, going back to yesterday's show. But on today's episode, we're going to go through Daniel Jones's very disappointing second preseason matchup for the New York Giants. Daniel Jones' first action back. We're going to get through everything that happened for Daniel Jones during that game. Also, we're going to get into what Tua Tagovailoa had to say about Brian Flores and their relationship during the years that Brian Flores was there in Miami with Tua. He didn't hold any punches, so we're going to get into exactly what he said. Plus, also the quarterback battle going on with the New England Patriots. It's still wide open, it seems like, based on Gerard Mayo's comments. So we're going to dissect that and talk about the entire situation in its totality, along with some more topics down the line on today's show. But before we get started, as always, if you guys have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on today's show, sharing it is a huge part of this show. It makes the show a lot more fun, very interactive, and you guys add a lot to the content on this show by producing some of your opinions and or questions. So a great way of doing that is by using the Super Chat feature that we have available to you guys now with this show. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, again, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the super chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. But there's also still that alternative going back to previous shows. If you'd prefer to use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, you can still tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there as well. We couldn't do what we do on this show without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you guys as part of our community. Again, hit that super chat button on this episode to give your guys' question, opinion, or any comments that you'd like to share throughout this episode. But with that being said now, we can jump straight into the first topic on today's show, Daniel Jones. More of the same with Daniel Jones, but I guess in a different sort of environment, a different flavor, if you will, with 2024 now, some new weapons, some new additions to this offense. But again, like I mentioned, almost the same old Daniel Jones, as you could say, because Daniel Jones played in his first NFL-level game this past weekend after months of recovering from an ACL injury. He made it back in time for training camp. He has been getting ready for this moment, and now we finally got an opportunity to see him back out there on the field. And with him obviously being the starting quarterback for the Giants, we had the starters for the Giants out there as well as the starting defense for the Houston Texans, who they played at NRG Stadium. And as you can imagine, as I'm sure most of you guys saw, it went as bad as it probably could have for Daniel Jones and this offense. And I'm going to run through the series of events that really made up this entire performance, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth after I go through it. So as soon as the game started, Daniel Jones obviously out there. He had almost his first pass of the entire game almost picked off by Derek Stingley on a quick outside throw. I forget who the receiver was. It might have been Malik Neighbors, but regardless, pretty predictable throw. Derek Stingley almost jumps it, but he drops it overall, so they've dodged the bullet there. Then you continue on. Nothing happens in that series. Then they come back out for their second drive of the game. Good field position for the Houston Texans defense. They back up the Giants into their own end zone, and the most famous play you'll see, the most, rerun play, I guess you could say, of the entire offseason, something that's been talked about already so much just before I've even gotten the chance to mention it, is that interception that Daniel Jones threw backed up into his own end zone, falling down with a guy all over him. Instead of throwing it out of bounds, he tries to, I guess, throw it to the receiver. Questionable whether or not he was trying to actually throw it out of bounds. Maybe he got hit and it took some of the weight off of the throw, but regardless, it should have been a better decision made there by Daniel Jones. He throws it anyway in the direction of Jalen Petrie. He intercepts it and basically walks into the end zone 5 yards away. And the Houston Texans scored that way. So, awful decision. I'm going to get more into that once we go later on into this segment. But that was the second series. And then following that, the Giants get the ball back and everything. They make their way down the field. But then Daniel Jones again throws another interception to Derek Stingley, his second one of the game. Derek Stingley making up for the first one that he dropped down the right-hand sideline on a deep throw. Could have been a better throw, I think more so than the first one, obviously. It was a better play by Stingley, but on the score sheet, on the stat line, it doesn't obviously show that, and it just shows 2 interceptions. So not so good to follow that up for Daniel Jones, but then afterwards you got some positives out of Daniel Jones' playing time. He led a touchdown drive on their 4th series and also led them to a field goal right before halftime, and that pretty much did it for Daniel Jones in that game, only playing up until halftime. And after the game, Brian Daboll, acknowledged the poor decision made by Daniel Jones, overall needing the entire team to improve, not just Daniel Jones, because they did produce 5 turnovers that game. It wasn't just the 2 interceptions by Daniel Jones. They actually had 3 more after that. So it's something they need to clean up. He obviously mentioned that he wants to learn from this, and he is glad that it's only preseason, right? That's pretty much what every coach, what a bunch of people say right now in preseason. So that's what Brian Daboll had to say after the game. And overall, Daniel Jones finished 11 of 18, 138 yards, and 2 interceptions. Some more positives I guess you could take away from this before I give my thoughts is that they involved Malik Neighbors a little bit more, 4 receptions for 54 yards. Going back to the first game where he wasn't targeted, this is a better sign. But now I'll get into what I think. Daniel Jones, like I said, the question pops up in my mind whether or not is this rust? Is it worrying right now? Is it really only the preseason? Or is this just who Daniel Jones is? Is this what we can expect from him more so again in 2024? And just going back to that end zone interception, I think that really culminates everything. The majority of my points that I want to say, because that interception is not something uber rare or something that's never been seen by Daniel Jones. I think it's quite the opposite, actually. New York Giants fans will tell you that more often than not, those sort of plays happen with Daniel Jones, those bad decision makings, telegraphing the pass and making it really easy for defenses to read him. The turnover issues have always been a problem for Daniel Jones. So I think if you took like a lie detector test and asked the Giants fans if that was surprising to them to an extent to see an interception like that, most of them would say that it's almost to be expected with Daniel Jones. And that's the problem right there. Not only that it becomes expected, but that it's a consistent thing now. It's almost like a habit, and that's the last thing you want to happen with your starting quarterback, especially with all the context around Daniel Jones. We don't have to go back into that, and the contract they gave him, Saquon and everything like that, that's already written. There's nothing they can do about it. But now, with so much pressure on Daniel Jones heading into 2024, everyone, maybe they're not excited to see him back out there, but you're interested to see that, all right, 2024 is a big year. Everything that happened already happened, so let's go out there and see if Daniel Jones can outperform again and maybe go back to 2022 when he surprised everybody by performing great. But then you see something like that, and it's super disappointing because with Daniel Jones, the biggest thing about him is, the biggest thing with any quarterback is if you're going to throw interceptions, and especially if they're ugly interceptions like that, ideally, you'd want the good things that quarterback brings you to outweigh the interceptions, maybe the turnovers and things like that. Because if you're going out there and scoring 30 points per game and you're throwing about an interception and a half per game or throughout the season, it could almost be, just ignored to an extent because you're putting up so many points. But with Daniel Jones, you don't really get that at all, honestly. And the goods that you see from Daniel Jones just really don't outweigh all the negatives that you get from him and that have become a habit, essentially, like I mentioned before. So, it's something that unfortunately I think the Giants are sort of stuck with right now. And it's only the first game. I do acknowledge that. I don't want to, completely ignore that it is the first action back. But for Giants fans, again, it's not something that I think they'll rely upon and say, oh, he's coming off the ACL. He's just getting started in the preseason. He's coming back from injury, all that sort of stuff. I don't think many Giants fans who are, you would think, be on their quarterback side would even use that excuse anymore because it's so predictable and they've gotten so used to it now at this point that it's just not something that they're going to feel sorry for Daniel Jones, if that makes sense, at the end of the day. And also, in that decision-making as well, that's another thing sort of related to this. The decision-making you make as a quarterback, everything happens so fast, right? And that's what separates the good ones from the great ones, from the elite ones, right? To make those decisions and process everything so quickly. But with Daniel, to throw that ball in that situation, falling down, I've never played quarterback at any stage of professional, competitive, or anything like that. But making that play, making that sort of throw is something you see at, any regular park around anywhere that you see kids playing football, trying to make a hero throw, falling down, just chucking it up. That's not, at this level, you can't see things like that. And unfortunately for Daniel Jones, that's become more the common thing for him to see plays like that, recreational, base level plays, decision making that just don't help his case for everything that happened already, like I said, right? They bet on Daniel Jones. They gave him the money that should have gone to Saquon, will be the story that follows him throughout the rest of his career, at least during the time that he is a New York Giant player. You can't have plays like this. And not only is it fair or not to blame, the Giants' wrongdoings on just Daniel Jones, probably not, but that's what comes with being the quarterback. That's what comes with having all this responsibility. And honestly, all the blame of how the Giants look in 2024, most people will say that they're going to have an awful year. Kind of hard to disagree with them, but at the same time, in reality, I don't think it all falls on Daniel Jones, but he'll get most of the blame because of the fact that he makes so many mistakes, so many turnovers, where in reality, it was actually the decision-making by the general manager, by the head coach, by really this organization and how they manage all their players, not betting on Saquon, not valuing the running back market and letting him walk. Now he ends up with the Eagles as if you needed more of a reminder of the bad decision that you made in regards to Saquon and Daniel Jones. And now they're pretty much stuck with Daniel Jones. They have to live with the error, you could say, that they made, because I don't even think the question about starting him or not makes sense anymore, because I don't think it changes anything anyway. You could start Drew Lock, you could start Tommy DeVito, but you're going to be all right, less than 500 anyway. So to pose that question, I don't think it really makes a difference. If you're going to bench Daniel Jones, if anything, it makes you look worse because you're paying him so much just to bench him at the end of the day, where the other guys are probably not going to give you any better of a chance to win. So it's hard to pick out the positives for the Giants right now with how Daniel Jones has looked, but every little thing is going to be micro-analyzed for Daniel Jones. Obviously, he probably knows that, but he's just got to do a better job. Now it's all said and done. It's still, lucky for him, only still a preseason game, but it serves a big warning for the Giants, for Daniel Jones going forward, that just can't happen. Lucky there was only a preseason game, but now heading into the regular season, you got to tighten it up a little bit more. Don't throw that ball, improve the decision making, and at least don't make it so obvious that a loss or bad plays happen just because of you. If he tightens that up, maybe there could be some better optimism there, but that's what I really had to depict or say about the Daniel Jones performance. It made a lot of headlines. A lot of people talked about it, so I wanted to get on here and talk about it as well because it was far from good, obviously, for the Giants. So we'll see how it all plays out in the regular season. We have some more quarterback to get to, though, on today's show, talking about Tua Tagovailoa and his comments on his former head coach, Brian Flores, referring to him as a terrible person and just going through their relationship in 2020 and 2021, where those two guys were together. I'm going to provide the quotes and go into my opinion on what happened and how it all broke down between these two in 2020 and 2021. So stay tuned. We got a lot more to talk about on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue talking about some more quarterback stories around the NFL. This time, bringing up the harsh, very real comments that Tua Tagovailoa made about his former head coach, Brian Flores. And before we get into the quote, let's go through some of the history of what broke down between these two guys to maybe get a better understanding of why Tua had these words to say about Brian Flores. So, to start off, Tua was drafted in 2020. At that time, Brian Flores was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And like it usually happens for rookie quarterbacks, Tua didn't start right away. You get, used to that. That's something that's not abnormal, especially with Tua coming in and the injury concerns. Not too big of a surprise that he was on the bench to start right, especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick during that time also being on the roster. He was looked upon as a very solid quarterback to at least have on your team to get by, to give you the results when needed. He's not going to lose too many games for you, so they had that going for them for the start of that 2020 season, and it wasn't until halfway through that season that Tua started to become more of a prominent name. He actually started in some games halfway through the year over Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you would think that that was the opportunity, right, for Tua to take the job and run with it for the second half of the year, but it didn't happen like that. It actually went as bad as it could have, like I always mention, because Brian Flores actually benched Tua twice during the 2020 season, and, instead of riding out through some of the problems, through some of the obstacles that they ran into, Brian Flores benched them twice, brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick again, and right away, not a great start to Tua. Like I said before, it's not ideal. That's almost like my worst nightmare with a rookie quarterback or just any new quarterback, to start the new guy, give him an opportunity, and then just shock his confidence right away by benching him. Not only once is bad enough, but twice like Brian Flores did. Right away, the relationship isn't off to a good start, and then you follow that up in 2020, which was an odd year as well because you had the Miami Dolphins and especially Brian Flores really trying to go out and try their hand at attaining Deshaun Watson in that offseason. They were one of the major contenders, and they made it pretty obvious that they really wanted to go out and get Deshaun Watson in favor of Tua just after 1 year of drafting him. And already, not only did you bench Tua twice, did the organization almost not show full faith in the 5th overall selection that they drafted just a year ago. They were ready to move on from him right away, trade him potentially for Deshaun Watson, and obviously that didn't end up happening, so now you're left in a very awkward situation because the quarterback now knows that you were ready to give up on him. You drafted him very high, and now you didn't get the other guy that you wanted, so you're stuck with this quarterback after shocking his confidence and really not believing in him to the full extent. And all of that broke down and ended up with Brian Flores being fired after the 2021 season. Mike McDaniel comes in after a season or two with Tua. After this past year, you see the level that Tua Tagovailoa has reached under Mike McDaniel, having a Pro Bowl level season. And now, so many months, so many years actually removed from those events, Tua appeared on the Dan Le Batard show recently and was asked about the differences between Brian Flores and Mike McDaniel. And that's where he didn't really hold any punches. He didn't hold anything back in explaining it in the way that he did in this quote. He said, To put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you that you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this, you're accurate, you're the best whatever, you're this, you're that, how would it make you feel listening to one or the other? And pretty clear on who he's talking about, obviously, saying who he's talking about without actually mentioning Brian Flores' name. And then he later alluded, not mentioning Brian Flores directly by name, but you could obviously guess who he's talking about by alluding to Brian Flores and being a terrible person, and basically explaining how after 2 years of that, he almost started to believe all the words that Brian Flores was saying to him and really started to question whether or not he belonged playing at that level. And he went on to say that it took about 2 years of sort of training that out of his mind before he got to the point where he is today with Mike McDaniel. And I think you could see it in his personality now when you talk to him, when you see him out there. Not only does that come with years of being in the NFL, but I think truly that you see the different kind of results that you've gotten with two of the head coaches, one with Brian Flores and the panicked, just anxious Tua that you got early on. Again, a lot of that comes with the youth and inexperience, but really with Mike McDaniel now, always shooting confidence into Tua Tagovailoa, and now you see Tua a lot more happy, a lot more confident in himself, and it produces a season that he had, leading the NFL in passing yards, making the Pro Bowl, MVP talks at one point at the start of this past year, and you could almost, it's not a direct correlation, just with switching the coaches, but it doesn't help the case too much for Brian Flores to see him get fired, have 2 seasons with Mike McDaniel, and see almost a completely different Tua. And it almost validates what he's saying here. And now getting into the comments that he made on, I never know if it's actually true or not because I obviously wasn't there. So you got to take Tua's word for this. Yesterday that Brian Flores, addressed these comments and didn't deny them in any sort. So gives you more reason to believe in what Tua's saying. So to now get into it and talking about whether or not, Brian Flores was right or wrong in doing this, I think it just depends really on, his coaching style and everything like that. He was brought in through the Belichick tree, and seeing Tom Brady get coached by one of the best coaches of all time, that worked for them, right? That was perfect for that relationship, for that situation. Both of them were almost cut from the same cloth, Belichick and Brady. How just maniacal and sometimes some of their expressions were pretty, even keeled, lifeless in a way, and they were the perfect match for each other. Belichick knew that he could say and motivate Tom Brady in a certain type of way that Brian Flores seeing that and seeing the results especially that came from it. Maybe he tries to adapt that. Maybe he tries to be aggressive and confrontational with his players, and now taking that from Bill Belichick and applying it to his coaching style, especially with being a defensive coordinator too. I think that comes with it a little bit, just being more amped up and aggressive, you could say, for Brian Flores. And he applied that obviously to Tua, and you could see now that obviously that didn't go as planned. And I think the biggest reason, obviously, I'm sure you guys have heard a bunch of people mention it now, is just that it takes a different sort of approach to coach different players, right? You can't just always scream at players, tell them that they're not good enough, tell them that this throw was awful. It requires a different sort of leadership, a different sort of approach on a personal level to coach different players. And, not everybody can be coached like Tom Brady. Not everybody, obviously, not everyone is the player Tom Brady was, but also they're not the same person. I saw the interview Tom Brady did with Stephen A. Smith at Fanatics Fest over the weekend, and he mentioned one of the things that got him motivated was just being angry, just being, very emotional in that sense, finding anything to get him mad, and that way he played better. And what gets you more mad than your coach telling you that you're awful, that throw was pathetic and things like that? That got Tom Brady going. That motivated him to play better. Tua clearly isn't the same person. And I think to me, what separates, great coaching, what separates great leadership from just good, solid coaching that gets the job done sometimes is that you're able to adapt to the different personalities that you have on your team. You can't talk to Tom Brady the same way that you can talk maybe to a Julian Edelman or somebody like that, or Gronk in that sense. You can't talk to Tua the same way that maybe you can talk to Tyreek or Jalen Waddle or Raheem Mostert in that sense, or Christian Wilkins, Jalen Ramsey when they had Christian Wilkins on their team. It requires a different sort of personal approach to get these guys to all buy in. And that's, again, what separates the all-time Hall of Fame coaches from really good ones. And obviously, it might not have applied to Bill Belichick. I don't know exactly how he talked to other guys, but when you have one of the best quarterbacks at all times, sometimes that is able to mask your maybe inability to connect with other guys in different sort of ways. But nowadays, when you don't have the GOAT as your quarterback, obviously, you have to take different approaches to coach these guys, and not everybody can be approached or talked to in the same way that Tom Brady can. And obviously, Brian Flores, getting his first, cracks at it as a head coach, you can't fully, just go full in on him and say that he was completely wrong. Like, how could you do this sort of thing to Tua? But that's just how, like I mentioned before, how he saw it happen, how he saw it develop into great results. He took that and ran with it, and obviously, you can only hope that he learned from it. But to some people or anybody that believes that this is just weak, when Tua Tagovailoa says, mentioning what Mike McDaniel said to him, saying, "Dude, you're the best fit for this. You're accurate. You're the best whatever. You're this. You're that." Some people might take that as a sign of weakness, that Tua needs to be, cuddled, have an arm around him and, say that everything's all right, and interpret it almost as a weak sort of personality, soft player to some people's extent. And to that, I would just say, it's not really it's not a sense of just being soft or weak or anything like that. It's just, if you're a head coach and you have the opportunity to coach, a talented offense, a talented player like Tua was being drafted so high, it's not a sense of this player just being weak. They're not falling in line to how I'm coaching him. They're just weak. They're not built for the NFL level. Having that mindset is very much just one-dimensional and very much just not a way of successfully approaching, getting the best out of your players. With so much that they invested in Tua, and the fact that having this mindset of just coaching him one way and pretty much just throwing away the investment that you made with Tua by not trying to adapt and trying to get the best out of him is just not the right mindset to take at all, because at the end, you end up losing more than you gain, because who ends up getting fired after things not working out with Tua? It's Brian Flores. So not being able to adapt and not being really able to connect with Tua and trying to change your coaching style in a way that fits him, not just one size fits all, ends up costing Brian Flores the job, right? Yeah, Tua might not have fallen in line, and then he has all these bad things to say about you, but again, at the end of the day, you're the one that loses your job because you're not able to adapt and get the best out of Tua. So at the end, I think it almost serves as just another example to show other coaches of how really it should be done. Not everybody is the same player. Being adaptable is one of the best things you could do, not only as a head coach, but as a quarterback, adapting to the new age of the NFL, or if you're a new coach, again, changing your ways to fit the mold of the NFL today, and just overall being able to relate to everybody is one of the best things that you always hear players talking about coaches like Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Andy Reid, or Sean McVay. They're able to connect with these guys on a personal level, and that's why so many players want to play with them. And, maybe the results aren't necessarily always there, but being able to do it is not a surprise why the Steelers or the Rams or the Chiefs are always contending teams. Is because their head coaches are able to connect with everybody and get the best out of all the different personalities that they have on their roster. So that's what it happens. That's already in the past with Brian Flores and Tua. I like the answer that Brian Flores gave just today, I want to say, on this entire situation, saying that he can only learn from it. And, it's in the past already, so not too much to crucify Brian Flores, because, again, it's just what he saw. He saw what worked, and he tried to apply it, I would assume. So you can't kill him over it too much at this point in his career. Being a defensive coordinator, too, I think just suits him better. And hopefully he can have a good season with the Minnesota Vikings there this year. But that'll wrap it up for this segment. We have some more quarterback talk now with one of Brian Flores' old teams in the New England Patriots, talking about their quarterback battle still being wide open, and deciding between Jacoby Brissett and Drake May could be closer than originally anticipated. Gerard Mayo weighs in on it, and we're going to talk about whether or not it's too early to fully buy into Drake May, or is this the right decision to take. We'll be right back with that topic. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping right back into the action here on the show, some more quarterback discussions back on the Patriots and deciding what's going to happen with their quarterback battle, because Drake May made his full debut last Thursday against the Philadelphia Eagles, and after only playing one drive in his first game, we finally got a good look of what Drake May could provide as an eventual starter for the New England Patriots. He finished that game 6 of 11, 447 yards and a rushing touchdown. He didn't play, lights out by any means, but he was very efficient. He had some exciting plays, made some good throws as well, and he got himself a touchdown. So already pretty exciting coming off that first game, like I mentioned. A lot of people were left disappointed with not seeing him, so now getting to see him more, getting more playing time in this second preseason game, I think serves him very well, and it almost paid off everything that he has been doing in training camp and whatnot and things like that. More optimism now surrounds Drake May, and it could be pretty close. He could be pretty close to being their starting quarterback based on what everybody's saying, all the optimism, all the hype around Drake May just after his second preseason game. And now everyone's starting to bring up the question, could he or should he start right away for the New England Patriots? And Gerard Mayo brought up last week how after the game, how it's all about earning your role on his roster, on his team that he is now the head coach of. So he mentioned that if Drake May plays better overall in his estimation and his evaluation of both quarterbacks, he will end up starting. That is how Gerard Mayo is approaching this. And initially at the start, I think I remember back to the spring where Gerard Mayo made a comment on this, saying that at that point in time in the spring, it was Jacoby Brissett's job. At that point, after the spring, he said if you were to ask him who the starting quarterback was, it was ultimately Jacoby Brissett at that time. But now, obviously, things change. Drake May's gotten a chance to go out there, play against NFL-level competition, and he surprised a lot of people. You heard about it in training camp. You were left impressed with it, with some of the reports and some of the optimism you heard in training camp, like I said. But now, it's becoming a closer competition because you see it now on the field, and with this team being in a position of just uncertainty, I could say, very young team as well, you could almost approach it as you don't have anything to lose, so why not start Drake May at the end of the day out there as well? And Gerard Mayo sort of alluded to the fact that that could be a real possibility yesterday when he told the Greg Hill Show that 100% Drake May could be quarterback one against the Cincinnati Bengals in their Week 1 matchup, and he went on to explain a little bit more on how he's approaching, who the starting quarterback is going to be when he made this statement here, as you guys can see. He said, "We're still in training camp. We still have our preseason game against Washington, and once again, we don't have a starting quarterback right now. When it's time, we'll announce that, but he could absolutely be QB1, he meaning Drake May, so could Jacoby. We've got to see how it plays out." And, you know what's very weird about this situation, eerily weird about how everything is breaking down? I had no idea until I read this somewhere else in an article that it's very similar to how things broke down with Mac Jones and Cam Newton back in 2021, because that was the year that Mac Jones was drafted. He wins the starting job over the veteran, over the bridge quarterback in Cam Newton at the time as a rookie. He goes 10-7 with that New England Patriots team. They make the playoffs. They lose in the first round, but then everything starts off well. Mac Jones is playing great in the preseason, gets everybody excited. He ends up winning the job, and then, the first season goes pretty well. You think you're going to build off of that going forward, but that wasn't the case. It was quite the opposite, actually, when you follow up that 10-7 rookie season by 2 straight losing seasons, and Mac Jones is ultimately traded this offseason to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And not to say that history is going to repeat itself exactly how it did back in 2021, but surely if you're Gerard Mayo, obviously being close to the team around that point, you also don't think it's going to happen exactly like it did back then, but you have to be certain this time around, and you have to try and avoid that as much as possible, knowing that you have a very eerily similar situation now with your 2 quarterbacks. Let's make sure that Drake May is put in a position, most of all, to go out there and not have his confidence be shot down right away by making some mistakes, playing against starting level, elite level NFL competition. And then it almost turns out like Tua. We just finished talking about Tua and how bad his rookie season went, being benched twice in that year. That's the last thing you want, to absolutely just shoot down the confidence of your rookie so early on. They have to make sure that Drake May is in that pole position, funny enough, like Mike Tomlin says, with Russell Wilson, to make sure that he is your starting quarterback and that you feel confident enough in him to lead you to good results. And not only that, but psychologically, mentally, knowing that Drake May is going to be able to take a bunch of hits, take a bunch of punches to his mouth right away in the NFL, and know that he's going to get back up, learn from it, not be rattled by it at all, and keep trudging forward in that sense. And especially with Gerard Mayo being a former player for this organization and spending time watching and learning as much as you can from the GOAT in Tom Brady, you have that player-like experience already, and how that situation with Tom and everything that was run in that Patriots organization, you got a taste of that. So not only am I expecting them to make the right decision here, but also having that expertise, that experience in your pocket, I think should serve them as, a service to approach the situation in the best way possible, because they've been in those locker rooms, they've been in those situations with a young quarterback. They know how it all could play out in a good way and also in a negative way. So I'm expecting them to make the right choice here, assuming that they're going to make the right choice based on everything that they've seen already through training camp, but also from a player side, as Gerard Mayo was also a former player. But to me, talking about who I would start and whether or not it's too early to start Drake May at this point in time, I would say it is a little bit too early. I would say, to me, I just always err on the side of caution with these situations, with rookie quarterbacks, with just, in my experience as a Steelers fan, seeing Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, I would side with starting the veteran just right off the bat, because you don't know, really, you could, as much as I just mentioned, the expertise, the experience that Gerard Mayo has as a former player, learning in those situations with this Patriots organization, you don't really 100% know how Drake May is going to react on a personal level, mentally, psychologically. You can be about 80% sure, 90% sure, maybe even at some times, but again, that other 10%, that other 20%, you don't really know. The only one that really knows that is Drake May. So for me, I would err on the side of caution, and still, we're only 2 preseason games in, pretty much only 1 for Drake May, having played only in this second one. We're still waiting for this 3rd preseason game. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of Drake May in that game as well, but I don't want to rush into this situation again, especially with the Patriots and where they are in their development, in their trajectory on getting back to being a competitive team. I just don't see this being a situation where the positives outweigh the negatives, because even if Drake May, kills it in his third preseason game, he does win the starting job. He has Jacoby Brissett in his ear, learning from him and whatnot. At the end of the day, I think even with all of that potentially being the case, and if he does play decent in his first season in the NFL, I don't feel like it's going to be enough to take this Patriots team to really a contending level team in just their division, but forget about the conference and everything like that. I don't think it's going to be enough because of the surrounding pieces around the quarterback position. So to me, you have almost more to lose than more to gain in this situation with Drake May. Starting him right away, again, just doesn't move the needle too much for me and how I feel about the Patriots overall as a team. So to me, knowing that, approaching this season with that mindset that we're going to take a bunch of punches, we're going to be knocked down a lot, we're going to be kicked, we're going to be beaten down a lot in these games, potentially playing some of the better teams in the NFL, but all we have to do is just get up, learn from it, take our hits, lick our wounds, and then just move on into the next week and go on learning week by week and how we can get better that way. To me, starting Drake May, again, just doesn't move the needle too much for me, and Drake May is certainly turning heads already, not only in this preseason game, but in training camp. He's getting more reps with the starting offense, but I think right now the negatives outweigh the positives here because of the roster that the Patriots have, and to compare it to Mac Jones are already being similar in this situation. Back then, there was more veterans on the team, and this year with this Patriots team, there's a lot of young players, a lot of players that need to be led in the right direction. So to me, having a rookie quarterback in there, they still have a lot to learn, not only just on the field, but in terms of being leaders, being generals in that sense, and being an influence in the locker room. To throw that all on Drake May right away and carry that pressure on and off the field isn't too beneficial for me. I'd rather have Jacoby Brissett, be that veteran in there, know what to do, know how to be a professional with this young team compared to that 2021 team where there was more veterans on it. I think it's better suited for a veteran to come in here, bring this team along, have them all learn together, along with Drake May, learn what it takes to be a leader on the field and off the field. And that way, maybe at some point you do end up starting Drake May, but at least it's not in a spot where right off the bat you're expected to get results, because that's what fans and everybody wants to see. With a young quarterback, there's excitement. You think you have a chance now, but then when you don't, you feel like you let a lot of people down, and that could really damage a rookie quarterback's psyche. So to me, I think it's a little too early. I would give it maybe at least 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and only if Jacoby Brissett is absolutely terrible, I would give it 2 to 3 weeks. But then if he's doing all right, you're sort of competitive, I would carry it as much as I can before I really commit to Drake May and just throw him out there, see how it goes. I think Jacoby right now is in a better situation for all those reasons that I mentioned. So that's how I feel about it. Let me know what you guys think on who should be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots in 2024. But with that being said, we're going to go to another break. When we return, we're going to talk about the entire rookie quarterback class again from yesterday's show and how we could potentially see 4 rookie quarterbacks become the starters in week 1. They could be on the verge of making history with the amount of rookie quarterbacks starting. We're going to get into all of that and how this quarterback class too compares to that 2020 class that was very successful as well. So stick around. That is coming up right after the break. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, talking some more rookie quarterbacks on today's show and in this segment. And specifically, when I was looking into this rookie class and seeing how many rookies could actually start come week 1 of the regular season, it's pretty historic when you think about how many could start and how many could have started if everybody stayed healthy and everything like that. But this rookie class, I think, isn't being talked about too much in a way that they are very much set up in a way that they could be one of the better ones that we've seen in a long time, but it really compares to that 2020 class with Tua, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Jalen Hurts, and Jordan Love, and guys like that. But this quarterback class already has been making history already in this year, going back to the NFL draft in terms of just quarterbacks in this draft class, because a total of 6 quarterbacks obviously were taken in that first round, which ties the NFL record for the most amount of quarterbacks taken in just the first round. It ties the 1983 rookie quarterback class that included Dan Marino, John Elway, and Jim Kelly, etc., etc. And not only that, not only does it tie that very impressive quarterback class, but also with 6 quarterbacks taken, 6 of them were taken within the first 12 picks of this year's draft, which is the fastest in NFL history that many have been taken in just the first round. You go back to that 1983 class, and 6 of them were taken in 27 picks, and this year, 6 of them were taken in just 12 picks. So it marks the fastest amount of time that amount of quarterbacks were taken in the first round. And just right now, where we are in the offseason since the NFL draft happened, and now where we are right now, after the second week of preseason, looking and comparing this rookie quarterback class to others along the way, it looks like, I would say I'm pretty confident in saying that I think a total of 4 rookie quarterbacks could be starting right away. We already know 2 for sure. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are guarantees. They have been named the starters. And then you look at guys like Drake May, who we just finished talking about, having a good chance of becoming the starter if that's the way the Patriots want to go. And also Bo Nix. After both of them built great momentum after the second week of preseason, Bo Nix stacking back-to-back good performances, Drake May having his first real debut and performing very well. It could be potentially, when you look at this overall class, not just the 4 of them, but then you start, hypothetically thinking about J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix. If they were also to start, this could have been the most rookie quarterbacks to start in week 1 of a rookie season if all of them were to start. But obviously that's not going to happen, right? Because J.J. McCarthy got injured and Michael Penix shouldn't be the starter, not because he's a bad player or anything like that, but based on how everything that the Falcons did this offseason, it should be Kirk starting week 1. But if Michael Penix were to start, they could have at least tied the record for the most amount of rookie quarterbacks starting in the week 1 game of the NFL regular season. The last time that amount of rookies started in week 1, you'd have to go back to 2012 when 5 rookie quarterbacks started in week 1. And I actually have those guys on here to show you the last time there was this amount of hype, this amount of attention on rookie quarterbacks potentially starting. Back to that 2012 class, you look at guys like Robert Griffin III, who started right away. Andrew Luck started right away. Ryan Tannehill, another one in that class. Russell Wilson, Brandon Weeden. All 5 of these guys make up the rookie quarterback class that made up the most amount of these rookies to start ever in an NFL Week 1 regular season game. 5 is the most amount, is the highest amount that have started, and it makes up these 5 guys. And with how historic this rookie quarterback class has already been in 2024, they had a good shot, I believe, to almost break this record if all 6 of the guys were healthy and able to start. But obviously, like I mentioned before, Michael Penix probably isn't going to start, and obviously J.J. McCarthy is out for the entire year. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see this record be broken or tied up. But I think this rookie class was very much on their way to not only making this sort of history, but also in the long run, looking at the quarterbacks and how successful they were ultimately in their NFL careers. You look at all these guys, and probably Russell Wilson is the one that stands out the most as being the most successful. Andrew Luck, everything that happened with him, retiring early. Robert Griffin III suffering with injuries. Ryan Tannehill now not really getting over the hump, and the same thing with Brandon Weeden as well. You look at this class, and I think it really gives you a sense and a feeling that it can be uber successful in terms of who we're talking about and what we could have in store. We already mentioned the 4 that could be starters. These are the 4 guys that could be starting week 1. And you start to compare, at least I started to compare this class, like looking at it from a historical standpoint and how many, quarterbacks already are impressing. I think that's been the story pretty much of this entire preseason on how well and well-groomed these quarterbacks are right away, just out of college. You look at Bo Nix coming in right away. It seems like he fits exactly what Sean Payton wants in a quarterback. He hasn't been named the starter or anything like that, but I think he has probably the third or the next highest probability to start, other than Caleb, who's starting. Jaden Daniels announced as the starter yesterday as well. And then you look at a guy like Drake May as well, thought to be the backup quarterback to Jacoby Brissett initially, but now he's also impressing. He could be a starter week 1. We just finished talking about it. And Jaden Daniels looking very calm, very cool, controlled in his preseason games as well. And Caleb, just fitting the bill of what a number 1 overall pick should be. So right away I started comparing it to other quarterback classes, not only that 2012 class in terms of how many rookies could start week 1, but also just very recently looking at this 2020 class where it's looked upon as one of the more successful, prosperous quarterback classes in recent history, because you look at the guys that were drafted in 2020. We just finished talking about one of them, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow, and how successful they all are right now. You look at all of them in where they are in their careers right now. You look at all of them and how they've all been extended to massive deals. They've accounted for $1.2 billion in extended new contract money. So Justin Herbert, very successful, the face of the Chargers. Jordan Love, now the face of the Green Bay Packers. Tua, pretty much the face of the Miami Dolphins after they gave him that extension. Jalen Hurts, the same thing. That offense is basically built around his skill set. And then you have Joe Burrow as well, the face of the Cincinnati Bengals. And those guys are pretty much set up to be, overall in terms of a class, a very successful draft class. And not only that, but now you look at it and compare it to this rookie draft class, and there could be 4 starters in this draft class, like I mentioned. But in 2020, with how successful they were, only Joe Burrow started right off the bat. So already there, it seems like just from that comparison alone that this draft class is really set up to be one of the better ones, especially because I think it was needed to have a rookie quarterback class like this, because you look at who was drafted in 2021 and then in 2022, not looking too great right now. Obviously, drafting guys like Trevor Lawrence in that time, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis was in one of those 2 draft classes, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and things like that. It hasn't panned out for a lot of those quarterbacks in 2021 and in 2022. And then you look at 2023 and you have CJ Stroud basically being the most successful one out of the group, producing the best rookie year statistically in NFL history. So you kind of got it back to a level of a lot of success and prosperous, production from CJ. But in terms of an entire class, I think this one is set up very much in a great way to produce a lot of great quarterbacks and good quality starting quarterbacks for the foreseeable future. And not only that, in terms of just comparing it to that 2020 class, you could almost say that there are more expectations out of this one, almost like this rookie quarterback class was expected to see a lot of results right away, because you look at the makeup of each quarterback and what sort of their narrative is heading into the NFL. You look at Caleb being that first overall pick, looked upon as that generational talent, much like Joe Burrow was. Then you look at Jaden Daniels. He won the Heisman right away, so already considered the best quarterback in college football by winning that award. Then you look at a guy like J.J. McCarthy, won the national championship, so right away thought of as a great leader, a great quarterback to lead his team to that national championship. Same thing with Michael Penix, had a great senior season, crazy stats, made it to the national championship as well. And then you got guys like Drake May and Bo Nix also producing one or two great seasons in college. Drake May having a great year with North Carolina, maybe dipping a little bit in the last year there, but still impressing a lot of people. And then Bo Nix as well, statistically putting up great numbers at Oregon in his last year. So you could almost say that this rookie class, just based on their history, their narratives around each one of them and their story, and now how successful they've been so early on, they could right now, to me, be set up to maybe outperform that 2020 class in a way. And you look at the crazy amount of money that 2020 class got overall, all these guys, I believe, could be the next line of quarterbacks to get this contract, or get these contracts, I should say, and be paid as they should as the face of their franchises. But obviously we're a long way away from that, and I just thought it was interesting to bring that up now, and how, crazy it is that this quarterback class, and how, looking at projections and predicting and trajectories and all that sort of stuff, how close they are, and how initially looked upon as this class as being one of the more successful ones just right away without even having touched the regular season. All of them have been making a good case for themselves, and now, obviously, like the media does, looking forward and projecting and predicting things like this. I thought it was super fascinating to look at it and see how they compare to 2020, and how much the NFL really needed, I think, a quarterback class like this, because after falling short of it in the last few years, having this influx of talent, I think, is great for the NFL. Excitement from these young players coming in, and it should produce a lot of good performances and a lot of great games in 2024. That's why I'm so excited about it. I think that's why a lot of people are excited about it. So I wanted to bring that up, and how eerily similar it is to 2020, but also how they're almost set up to outperform them as well. But that's pretty much it on talking about rookie quarterbacks as well. But we have one more segment to talk about, with the latest news regarding the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Randy Gregory agreeing to part ways and releasing the pass rusher after just signing him this offseason. We're going to go into that just briefly here to close out the show. So stick around. We have one more topic to talk about in just a few seconds. We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to go over this last segment here that we have in store. Just briefly going over the developments of this situation between Randy Gregory and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because it's been an odd one, because the Bucs and Randy Gregory initially, agreed to a one-year deal overall, but finally reached an agreement to release the edge rusher this week, and the Bucs will get back the signing bonus that they set out for Randy Gregory. So it turned out as bad as it could have for a free agent signing. And Genwil Bolandres, you ain't anything special, Tua. He's an NFL fantasy dream for points, but a bum. It is what it is, I think, with Tua. I think it's very polarizing with Tua. You could look at it as a guy that gets hurt a lot, doesn't have a great arm. That's everything that's been said about Tua. But in another breath, he puts up great performances. One of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last year. So very polarizing guy. And I think a thing that I didn't mention before in that segment was that while Brian Flores might be getting a bunch of the heat for how that situation broke down, there does come a point where Tua has to prove him wrong in a sense now that he has the head coach that he loves. He produced a great year. It comes to a point now where you have to just go out there and be successful, because if you're not, going back to that situation with Brian Flores, it could look now like a situation where Brian maybe was right about doubting Tua to an extent years after still Tua has not been successful. So I can see both sides of it, but going back to this situation now with Randy Gregory here, like I mentioned before, the Bucs signed Randy Gregory to a one-year deal this offseason to add what I thought was good depth at that spot, especially with guys like Yaya Diaby and just other guys on that roster that really haven't stepped up too much from an edge rusher perspective. But, with the situation, Randy Gregory just never showed up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at any point this offseason in minicamp, OTAs, training camp, obviously. He was not present at all whatsoever for the Buccaneers, and he exceeded $1 million in fines on Saturday, when it was the last time that those fines started coming in for Randy Gregory. So, exceeding that much in fines is, crazy, ridiculous, and really one of the biggest things about this situation and how odd it was that a big thing that the Bucs mentioned was that they never really knew why Randy Gregory failed to show up, because it wasn't a case of getting a contract or getting an extension or anything like that, similar to Hassan Reddick. I couldn't tell you a reason why Randy Gregory failed to show up, and it came to a point where there was a lot of back and forths. Todd Bowles had some comments to make about it earlier on in the offseason, but ultimately it ended up, again, with them agreeing to a release of Randy Gregory, and also the Bucs placing Randy Gregory on the reserve did not report list on July 23rd. So that pretty much began the process, and now they've culminated that with the release of Randy Gregory already. And some of the reasons, why I kind of pieced together why he wasn't there could be because at one point this offseason, Randy Gregory filed a lawsuit against the NFL and the Denver Broncos over an alleged discrimination issue back in June. Randy Gregory claimed that the Denver Broncos and the NFL denied him the use of a drug. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. You guys can look it up, but I'm going to butcher it. Pretty much a drug prescribed to him by a doctor to treat social anxiety disorder and PTS, and potentially dealing with that played a part in him not being able to show up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's as good of a reason as to why, again, he wouldn't show up. But, that was with the Denver Broncos and with the NFL, not really with the Bucs. So, again, it's just confusing. The Bucs and Todd Bowles have both said that they don't really know why he showed up. And Todd Bowles actually spoke on this and how it all ended up, just resulting in nothing, getting nothing out of Randy Gregory. Todd Bowles said, "I'll never find out, but I wish him the best, and we'll move on from there. You can't miss what you never had," and he claims that he did not get an explanation as to why, this happened. Contrary to my belief, Bowles added that he believes that outside linebacker is, he has the most depth out of any position at that spot. So my issue with how everything developed with Randy Gregory and the Bucs was just that it's almost looked upon as a big waste of time now, for the Bucs. And especially with Yaya Diaby dealing with an ankle sprain, a high ankle sprain, if I'm not mistaken, I felt more comfortable having Randy Gregory there to have another guy to deploy out there for yourself if Yaya Diaby was suffering with this throughout the entirety of the year or for extended weeks in the regular season. But, Todd Bowles is pretty confident in that group, saying that he has the most depth there out of any position, and he is very comfortable with the players that they already have. So that's not what I thought. That's not what I believe. But, Todd Bowles would obviously know more than what I know, being in there around those guys each and every day. The Yaya Diaby injury still worries me. He's trying his best to make it there for week 1. But rushing these ankle injuries is not particularly the safe way to go, because those are the kind of injuries that nag on and can become a problem for multiple weeks if you don't really treat it appropriately. So that's something that still worries me. And this situation sort of reminds me pretty much as close as you can get to Hassan Reddick, because you sign a guy that just doesn't show up, and basically it just becomes a messy situation that feels good once it's out of your head, and once you get it all over with, I'm sure it's a big relief. But in regards to how it compares to Hassan Reddick, you have a guy come in thinking that he's going to be a big part of your team, but ultimately, for whatever reason, it could be contract negotiations with Hassan or whatever reason Randy Gregory had for not showing up. This is how bad it could ultimately end up by releasing him at some point in time. And with Hassan Reddick and how it compares, I don't think the Jets are quite there yet, but I'm sure the Tampa Bay Bucks feel very relieved that they've just gotten this out of the way now and, are able to move on and not have this be a reoccurring problem that they have to address each and every week. So how it all plays out with Hassan Reddick, that'll be fascinating, because this one was very similar to that, and the Bucks just decided to say, we've had enough. We're not putting up with this anymore. Clearly, if you want to be here, you have to show up. You should have shown up before, but it wasn't the case with Randy Gregory, and they had no problem moving on from him. So it also has to be said that the Jets traded for Hassan Reddick, so they gave up something to attain him. So that also has a part to play in all of this. But it's hard to find a smooth and easy solution, basically, closer to this time of year, especially because it's just been too long that people just want it to end at this point in time. And for the Bucks, I think also just getting rid of it now and moving on from this situation and how just ugly and messy how it all got with Randy Gregory. Yes, they finally found a resolution, but now, to me, I think I would feel more comfortable trying to add more depth at this position, whether it's a guy like Yannick Ngakoue or something like that, or anybody else on the free agent market. I feel like they still need someone there, because overall in their defense, at each level, I think they have a decent piece in there with Levante David at linebacker, with Vita Vea in the middle of that defensive line. You have Antoine Winfield back there as well, the highest paid safety in the NFL. You have good guys on that defense, but having, edge pressure, having someone come off the edge and just be a disrupting presence, play in, play out, I think that you can never have too many of those guys. And to me, in the hierarchy of building a competitive team and considering yourself a good team, I think that having that pass rusher is non-negotiable. And Yaya Diaby is very good, but you need more than that. You at least need two of those guys to create havoc. And to me, that's something that the Bucks are, lagging, or just lacking, I should say, at this point. And in a division where, we talked about, I think last week now, with the Atlanta Falcons getting very good and improving a lot over just a course of a couple of days last week, the Tampa Bay Bucks, I'm sure, are still there in terms of being favored for that division, or at least equal with the Atlanta Falcons up until this point. But you don't want to be left too far behind, and you don't want to be, dealing with a situation where you've become comfortable with where you are with your team. With the Falcons getting better, their defense is very much improved with Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons. They're not messing around by any means. So to try and keep up in this division, yeah, it might not be one of the strongest ones in the NFL, but you still want to make it a goal to finish first and wanting to keep pace with the Atlanta Falcons as well, because their defense got better. Their offense is obviously very talented, waiting to be unleashed with Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix, whoever the quarterback ends up being. The Bucs are right there with them. They have a talented offense. Their defense, like I mentioned, has good players, but I just worry that they're not addressing it to the level that I feel is necessary. So that could come back to bite them throughout this season if, Yaya Diaby does go down, and then you're really struggling to create pressure, and your offense, you put a lot more pressure on them to put up points because the defense can't stop anybody. So, a very messy situation with Randy Gregory. It all comes to an end now, deciding to release him already this week. So we'll see where the Bucs go from here, whether or not they decide to add more depth there. We'll keep an eye on that as we go along. But that pretty much wraps it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well, and following the network on all forms of social media. Check out more content around the NFL on the network's both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel, for more content on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast on both of those. And lastly, tune in every weekday live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL storylines and discussions around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me, and I hope to see you guys all back here joining me again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.